Welcome, I'm Doris Epstein, and this is Menschlife TV. Recently, our government, Stephen Harper's government, stunned the world when he suddenly severed all diplomatic ties with Tehran. The foreign minister spokesman said that our government is hostile and racist and accused it of doing the bidding of Israel and Britain. But how do Iranians here react? What are they saying? We're going to hear from Reza Moridi, who's the first Iranian-Canadian to be elected in any legislature, provincial or Canadian. And later, a new center for boomers, zoomers, and beyond that don't want to grow old in a rocking chair. The Center for Dynamic Learning, a dynamic place that's going to help people reinvent themselves. Welcome, Dr. Moridi.
Thank you very much, Doris, for having me on your show.
You are the first Iranian-Canadian ever to be elected in any legislature in Canada.
That's true.
And right now you're serving in the provincial legislature.
Yes, I do, yes. I represent the riding of Richmond Hill at the Ontario legislature.
Why do you think this announcement came about? It was before this video with all those massive bloody protests. It was well before anything that would have been an immediate trigger. What's your hunch? Why did our Prime Minister call this finito?
Well, as you know, before shutting down the embassy, the Iranian embassy in Ottawa, and the closing our embassy in Tehran, a few months ago actually, our government closed down the visa section of the Canadian Embassy in Tehran, and they moved the visa section from Tehran to Ankara. So that was the first step which they took. And the second step, of course, was the closure of the embassies in Tehran and in Ottawa. There are several reasons for that. One is that the diplomatic relationship between Canada and Iran has never been good for the past several years, since the Iranian government killed Zahra Kazemi, the Iranian-Canadian photojournalist who was captured in Tehran, and then they put her to prison, they raped her, and they killed her in a very inhuman way. So, since then, our relationship with Iran, diplomatic relationship, was very, very cold. We didn't have an ambassador, for example, in Tehran, and the Iranian government didn't have an ambassador in Ottawa. So they were, I think, diplomatic relations was at the level of charge d'affaires. In recent months, as I said, first they closed down the visa section, and recently they closed down the embassies. I believe there are several reasons. One was, again, the diplomatic relationship was never warm between the two countries. And then the second reason is the violation of human rights by the Iranian government was cited as one of the reasons, and there were other reasons as well. But I think one of the reasons was the security of our diplomats in Tehran. So that was another reason sometimes you hear. That
was so foretelling that they were worried about the security of the diplomats, because look what happened with the American diplomat being killed in Libya after the protests, and the danger to our diplomats all over in the Middle East, but particularly Iran, since we have an escalating time of tension. Well, that's true. To put it mildly.
Yeah, that's true, Doris. I mean, the Iranian government, the present regime of Iran, they don't have a good resume when it comes to looking after the security of foreign diplomats in Tehran. When this regime came into the office in 1979, just a year after that, they took the American diplomats as hostage for 444 days.
And our ambassador, over a year. Ken Taylor.
And our ambassador, Ken Taylor, who became a hero by saving I think 6 or 7 American diplomats in the Canadian Embassy, and then making arrangements for their safe departure from Iran.
Does that, they have a grudge against us since then?
Not really. I think that, yeah, for some years, I think, again, relations were very, very cold, but again, it became normalized until the killing of Zahra Kazemi by the Iranian regime, when our diplomatic relationship again became very cold. The other action of this regime in relation to foreign diplomats was the attack to the British embassy, which happened several months ago in Tehran. Some mobs and people attacked the British embassy. So I think when you look at our government's decision, when it comes particularly to that very point, so you would say that maybe they have done the decision which one should do. You can put it another way, that if in case somebody attacked our embassy in Tehran and took our diplomats hostage, or they harmed them or whatever, then it will be very difficult for the government to explain this at the House.
So it was no surprise to you?
No, it wasn't a surprise to me, and not for many other Iranians, for all these reasons. I mean, so no, it wasn't a surprise.
What is the community here saying about this? Does that affect Iranian Canadians? What about visas? What about in fact, our government warned Iranian Canadians not to travel to Iran because they're particularly vulnerable.
Yeah. Well, Doris, you may know that there are about 200,000 or maybe even more, maybe 300,000 Iranians living in Canada. And some of these people, they have relatives, many of them, they have relatives over there. They travel back and forth.
Do you have family still there?
Yes, I do, yes. Well, my sister and one of my brothers still live in Iran, just from my immediate family, and also my cousins, and there are, yes, relatives, extended family members, they live in Iran. And this is the case for almost everyone here. They have families, relatives living in Iran.
Does that affect you then?
Well, it affects the people, the Iranian Canadians, in the sense that renewal of passport, for example, or consular work will be a little bit delayed, or still, we don't have embassy here now. Iran doesn't have embassy in Ottawa, for example, or we don't have embassy in Tehran. So that certainly affects the consular relationship.
Okay, let's hear more about the impact on this decision on the Iranian community in just a moment. Dr. Reza Moridi, the first Iranian Canadian ever to be elected in Canada, and we're talking about the impact of our decision to sever diplomatic relations with Iran on the Iranian community, which you say is about 200,000 to 300,000. That's a lot of people.
That's right, yes. And the majority of these people, they are living in the GTA, and then the others are living in Vancouver, Montreal, and the large cities.
So how does that affect you with so much family in Iran? Do you go back and forth? Will that stop you? Is your family in danger because you're even talking on this program? The regime in Iran is a dictatorship regime, so that's the nature of that regime in Iran. But in terms of closure of the embassies, yes, that affected some certain people here, particularly business people and also ordinary Iranian Canadians who need to renew their passports or to get birth certificates for their children, that kind of administrative or consular work, which they need to do. Of course, now there's no embassy, so they can't do that. But other than that, the other effect of the whole thing, Doris, was that the Iranian currency dropped dramatically over the past few weeks, and that is affecting the lives of Iranian Canadians, mainly people who are retired people, the Iranian Canadians who are retired, and they get their pension from Iran converted to Canadian dollars and bring it over here, and they live on that. Or some students here whose families and parents, they are supporting them. So this has become very, very tough on those people, and that category of those two categories, students and the pensioners who get their pension money from Iran, and when they convert it to Canadian dollars, it becomes very, very minimal. Does this mean that the sanctions are working?
Well, at least you could say that it has a very dramatic effect on the Iranian currency. Iranian currency's value has been reduced from I give you an example. It used to be around 1,000 Iranian currency units was equivalent to $1. Now it is 3,000 or even 4,000. So 4 times less, basically. So the value of the Iranian currency has been brought down dramatically.
We know that there are lots of dissidents in Iranian society. We know that most are against this regime. And we also know that they live in terror of protesting and taking control. Do these sanctions help or hinder? Does that make them mad at us for doing it? or does that unite them more in terms of opposing the government?
Well, sanctions, even if they are very focused on the regime itself, it's going to affect the whole country for sure. There's no way. And that is the case in Iran as well. So people are suffering. There's no doubt. But in the meantime, people are also suffering or have been suffering under this regime as well. So it's a very tough decision. It's a very tough judgment. People are saying, there are certain people saying, no, there shouldn't have been any sanctions. But in the meantime, others are saying, well, if there was no sanctions and this regime is in the verge of making the bomb, so how are we going to stop this regime, preventing them from making the bomb? For the past 10 years, the world community, they have been negotiating with them, asking them to stop making the bomb, and they went nowhere. So the Western world, they had no choice, basically, to place in sanctions. But again, sanctions are hurting people for sure. I mean, the value of currency, when it drops to 1/4 of its original value within a very short period of time, that affects the price of everything. Basically increases on every minute in Iran. The price of commodities increases on an hourly basis. So these are the problems which affects the people. But on the other side, again, how can you answer that question? How can you stop the regime from making the bomb? So that's another.
Well, you have a background in nuclear physics. You have you've awarded several years ago. You were awarded an award, in fact, for your work in research. What's your comment about the nuclear threat from Iran?
Well, making the bomb, nuclear bomb, is not a very complicated technology, actually. It's just not. So they are in the process of enriching uranium. In order to make the bomb, you have to enrich uranium up to a degree of, say, 90%. So they are in the process of enriching uranium. I believe they have got to the point of 20% enrichment or close to that, or we don't know. I don't know the exact figures. I'm not there. Nobody knows.
Everybody's guessing.
But yeah, the guess is that they are getting around 20% enrichment already. They have reached there. So I mean, if they continue doing enrichments, they can get to 90% or 95% enrichment. And once they get that material enriched to that level of purity, then that provides them the fuel for making the bomb. So the rest will be basically assembling the bomb.
How close do you think they are?
I don't know. I guess nobody knows.
Everybody's guessing.
Everybody's
Your
guessing.
guess is as good as anybody's.
That's right. So, and then the regime doesn't allow the international community to come and take a close look, saying, look, they are not really making the bomb. They don't have any intention to make the bomb. Or they don't have the technology, or they don't want. So they are putting the whole world in a sort of darkness. That's why there is suspicion, and knowing this dictatorship regime, and the people say, well, maybe they want to become like North Korea. One day you get up and then they explode the bomb. And we have seen this in the past as well. For example, India, when they exploded their first bomb, I remember Indira Gandhi at that time was the Prime Minister of India, and she came out and she made a declaration saying that we just exploded a device.
And that was a surprise.
She called it device. So, and then Pakistan followed afterwards. So that is, as I said,
so it's
technology,
anybody's guess.
Anybody's guess, and technology is not very complicated technology.
Okay, we're going to take a break and come back in just a minute. Two to 300,000 Iranian Canadians. What is their attitude toward this regime?
Well, Doris, these 200,000-300,000 Iranians who are now living in Canada, and most of them are Canadian citizens now, they came to Canada after 1979 revolution. Before 1979, the number of Iranians in Canada would have been less than 10, 15, or 20, or 50 people, really. So they came after the revolution, meaning that they escaped from Iran. People who came just after the revolution in 1979 or 80s, on those years, some of them, they came as a refugee. They fled to Pakistan, to Turkey, neighboring countries of Iran, and from there they came to Canada. And others came through other routes. And later, many Iranians, they came as regular immigrants. And on those days, again, many people, they applied for immigration. They came as a landed immigrant. But there were many people who came as a refugee to Canada, and they come as a refugee to Canada. So these people came, the Iranians came to Canada because of that regime in Iran. Iranians, they haven't been an immigrant nation. Iranians, even who went to study, for example, young people like myself, for example, we went to study in Europe. I studied in England, and many Iranian students went to study in Europe, in North America. After finishing their education, they went back to Iran. So Iranians have never been an immigrant nation. But now there are about 5 million Iranians living out of Iran in various countries around the world. And they all left their country, their homeland, after this revolution, meaning that they didn't accept this regime, this dictatorship regime. That's why they fled the country.
But one of the rumors was, and I don't know if this is a fact or a rumor, that the embassy here was trying to recruit Iranians for their work, to sabotage, for spying, I guess. Is that correct?
Well, the culture attaché of the embassy a few months ago, actually, he came up publicly. He said that, our aim is to support Iranian Canadians to reach the highest level of political position or something, to work for our country, Iran, something on those lines, which our government responded, our foreign minister responded very strongly at that time. So that is, yes, that's their attitude, and they openly said this, and our government, rightly so, our foreign minister responded to that comment, yeah.
So he didn't find many takers then, because people are here, as you say, because they don't like that government.
No, that's true. But in the meantime, I'm sure that they have their own...
Of course, there's always money and payoff.
Yes, yeah.
I shouldn't be so naive.
Yeah.
And one thing that, the first time I met you, I was deeply touched. You, with a Jewish MPP, Karen Mock, organized a ceremony that celebrated the first day of spring.
Yes.
And Purim.
That's right.
And the place was jam-packed. I
Yes.
saw people crying.
Yeah.
You reach out here. The community comes together with the Jewish Iranian community and others. This was the first time anything like this had ever been. So what's your feeling about reaching out and bringing communities together?
Well, Doris, I always believed in communities. I always believed in people, and I always believed in bringing people together and using occasions like Nowruz, which is Iranian New Year, and the Purim, which is one of the very well celebrated Jewish festivities. And the Karen Mock, my very close friend, Karen, and as you know, Karen was Liberal candidate from Thornhill,
yes,
for the federal government. So, some years, apparently, Purim and Nowruz, they get very close, around March 21st or 22 or 20th. And that year, which was about 2.5 years ago, almost 3 years ago, in 2010, Karen and I, we were talking, and suddenly in our conversation, we noticed that Purim and Nowruz, they are going to occur very close to each other around March 20th. So we thought, why not to celebrate this together? So we came up with the idea, and we organized the event at Thornhill Community Center.
And I bet you didn't expect that response.
No,
it was
but
packed.
people
were
came
standing in the hall.
From Iranians and from the Jewish community of Canada and the Iranian Jewish community people. It was jam-packed, and for the first time in my life, actually, I became an actor. When we had this Purim skit. Yes. I think I acted as a ambassador, I believe. So, yes, a former physicist, current politician, became an actor. But apart from that, I think people had a great time, and they got to know, the Purim tradition, the Nowruz tradition, all of that. Another thing I must tell you, Doris, is that Purim, I'm sure you know that, has its origin in ancient Persia.
Ah, of course.
So that was that connection. So, all elements were there to celebrate these two festivities together.
Are there any Jews left in Iran now?
Oh, yes, there are many. I don't know how many, but there are many, yes.
Shiraz was the main center for Jewish life there?
Well, I think the main center was Tehran. And another main center was my hometown, the town where I have been born, Urmia.
Is that Azerbaijan?
Azerbaijan, yes. You know, there are 3 cities in the world, actually 4 cities, I think. They start with the word Ur. One is Urshalim, the other one is Ur in Iraq, the other one is Urmia, and there's one in China called Urumqi.
Does that mean that it refers to being ancient?
Yes, it's ancient, yes. Actually, Urmia in Iran is the 2nd ancient city after Shush. It's the 2nd ancient
We
city.
have a lot to learn about Iran, its culture, its history, and the fact that people are coming together here in Canada is a flag of hope to me.
It is, and there's so much similarities and commonality.
Well, Jews lived there for 2,500 years.
Yes, that's right. So yeah, there are lots of things to share and
and
enjoy and celebrate.
And hope.
And
I
hope.
thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. Pleasure.
Calling all boomers, zoomers, and beyond, reinventing lives with a brand new Center for Dynamic Learning. Meet the people that started this amazing new concept. Dorothy Aaron, Michael Sladovnik, and Arlene Smith. Michael, you've said this. We are not the same generation of retirees as our parents. Explain what you mean by that.
Well, if I go back 2 generations to my grandparents, when they retired, they sat around and waited. My parents, our parents' generation, by and large, are in between. They started to travel a bit more. They kept on with more activities. I think our generation is reaching the point where we are better educated, we retire with more resources at hand, and we can do more things. And I think we've become much more active, and we do not sort of feel that we want to stop doing what we did before, only we want to do it differently. So we're taking the energy we had, we still seem to have energy in our 50s and 60s and even into the 70s, and we're trying to channel it in different ways. And I think Center for Dynamic Learning is showing how, one of the ways that we're channeling that energy.
Expectations. We expect more than our parents and our grandparents?
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's no question that we don't want to give up our youth. We were the kids of the 60s. We're going to be kids forever. And I think we have that expectation going forward. I think we do not accept the fact that we're now senior citizens or getting there.
Rage against the night.
Rage is a good word.
No night. We want dawn, and it's a new dawn for you, Arlene Smith. Tell us about how you started the whole thing. Why?
I retired as a high school principal. I was very active, involved, and involvement was important to me. I looked at courses that were available, and there was nothing that really met my needs. I'd go to courses, I'd listen to lectures. I had a lot to offer, but I had no opportunity to do that. So I decided that we needed to start courses where there was interaction, where I could use my intelligence, my intellectual abilities to be involved. So that's how it started.
Well, your whole life has taken on a different direction. When I met you to talk about this program, you had just come back from hiking in Peru.
Absolutely. and that, for me, was just a dream come true. I was able to climb in the Andes.
Is this about making dreams come true at this time in our lives? Dorothy?
I don't know if it's making dreams come true, but it's. I think Michael was dead on when he said it's about some intellectual stimulation, about being involved, about intellectually, socially, and having, in a way, a second life beyond work life.
Why did you get involved, Dorothy?
I actually happened to see an ad in the Canadian Jewish News from the Prosserman JCC that said, come to a committee meeting that's developing programs for boomers and beyond, and Arlene's name was in it, and I happened to know Arlene from another group that we belonged to years ago, and I thought, okay, why not? I'll go and see what it's like. And
were you looking for something else, something new, something different?
Yes, I'm a consultant, and things were slackening off in my career. I didn't really feel like going after more business at this stage. This was a couple of years ago. But I was kind of wondering, what am I going to do with my life now?
That's the big one. That's the big one. That's what I mean, reinventing life. What am I going to do with my life now? And you came up with?
Well, we came up with the concept of CDL, Center for Dynamic, and dynamic was important because it meant people were involved and participating.
Instead of just being recipients of lectures.
Exactly,
passive.
exactly, yeah. And the committee, being part of the committee was a dynamic process. The presenters are volunteers, so that's dynamic. So we're looking at everybody involved in this process are volunteers, and that to us is very important.
Is it harder for men this time of life when the work life stops or ceases or takes on a half semi-retirement? Is it harder for men?
Because of my own background and my own family, my parents both volunteered and worked in charitable, my grandmother did, so I've been doing this for years, even when I was in education as a teacher. I was always on boards or doing other volunteer activities. That's me personally. I would have to say that of my friends, 70% of the men often don't retire when they could because they haven't got anything to do. There are a number of men I know who, and it becomes a problem for them, it's like falling off a cliff. And that becomes difficult. And so I've counseled people who are in their 40s and 50s, start getting involved in something. Could be a hobby, but it might also be something more social, more volunteering, because that will help you make the transition from work into a richer and fuller life. So yes, I think it is harder for men. Women tend to be more social anyways, generally. That's a gross generalization. But I found in my experience that women are more drawn to groups and therefore have the transition a little bit easier.
Would you?
I don't necessarily agree with that. Having a career and being involved, retirement was difficult for me because I really felt in my career I was contributing. And that was really important to me. I wanted to make a difference. And in retirement, I still wanted to make a difference. And I looked out there and I said, I'm not happy just to go and go to the gym where everything, where everything is about me. I want to make sure that I contribute to other people.
All right, more when we come back. Inventing yourself at the new stage of life called, for lack of a better word, retirement. I hate that word. Michael, you said before you retire, you should start thinking about it. How can you think about it when you're in the middle of going up the money tree and the mortgage and little kids to raise? How do you do that?
If you read the finance section of most of the papers, there's often a feature on preparing for retirement financially. And I don't think it's any less important to prepare for retirement intellectually, socially. We actually have one of the courses that we offer is the New Retirement, where we show examples of people who have retired, who have done a variety of things like adventure travel, like start their own business, do some consulting, volunteering on boards, and give examples to people who are coming up, who may say, you know, that would be an interesting thing for me to do. These are people who don't necessarily within their own lives already have a plan. So we're helping them make the transition. And, you know, looking at the ladies here, both of them have made the transition very well. You've heard, you know.
Well, I don't know if it was easy. It was not. It didn't go from here to there so smoothly. Did it? For you, it didn't.
No, there was about a month or two in there when I was sort of thinking, what am I?
Just a month or two?
Well, probably a little longer than that. But I had found things to do, and then I was sort of, what am I going to do now? And I wanted to do things that were more than just, I mean, as important as delivering Meals on Wheels or stuffing envelopes, I wanted to use my professional skills. And I was a facilitator, I still am actually, I do focus groups. And I also have done courses, and I wanted to take those skills in and use them going forward. And I've been able to do that. And it's been really rewarding to work together with these people to plan and to carry out the programs.
And your theme of wanting to contribute, wanting that you achieved and experienced as a high school principal, that theme continued for you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, to see people involved in courses where they are able to contribute and learn about themselves. And I want to just go back to the retirement course. I wish I had the retirement course before I retired, because I just jumped, and that's the way I do things. I jumped into retirement and thought the world will open up for me and I'll find things. And all of a sudden, all the emails stopped. The same people weren't talking to me, and I wasn't sure where to go. And so taking a course like that, not about the financial. I took a program about the financial retirement, but I would have liked to have taken a course that gave me some direction and also talked about the intellectual and emotional retirement.
You're nodding, Michael.
It's a familiar thing to me. I see it in many of my friends going through some of the same transitions, and some by circumstance are better prepared for it, and others by not. But I would agree that one of the most important courses we offer is the retirement. We offer a variety of courses, sessions for people on ethics, on family relationships, which are all useful. But the retirement one really speaks to this generation in terms of what's coming up next. If you're not ready for it, it can be a bit of a shock sometimes.
I don't know, is it like death? Can you ever be really ready for retirement? Your whole life changes.
Unless you know something that we don't know, there's nothing on the other side of death. There is on the other side of retirement, as much as you don't like the word.
Which reminds me, you do deal with death, and you do deal with the meaning. That's part of what people lose when they lose the steady work, a reason to get up in the morning, which we call work. There's that's the abyss, that's the space that you're talking about. And the danger of feeling irrelevant. You don't matter anymore. Your opinions don't count. You're not mainstream anymore. You're marginalized. And the world marginalizes you. When you're a certain age, let's face it, there's ageism out there. Would you agree?
I haven't run into it yet.
In general, philosophically.
I'm sure there is, but I've been a consultant for much
So
of
you
my
never
career,
had that.
so I haven't had
Did you either of you run into it?
I've seen it, haven't
And do
experienced
people
it yet.
report about it?
There
That
are
they're
some people who
disqualified for certain jobs, not because of that they have
Is it
visual
okay to tell
appeal.
an anecdote about somebody without mentioning names? Yes, you're going to get one. There was someone who had belonged to an organization at a fairly high level earlier, and who is now in his late 70s, and who occasionally lets it slip, not as a complaint per se, but it comes out that nobody asks him his opinion anymore. He's got 40 years of experience in an organization, but he's considered old-fashioned, that we know what you're going to say, and that's the end of it. That diminishes a person. And I think one of the things we're doing with CDL, because of the dynamic nature that Arlene spoke about, is getting people active. It's adult education. It's not, as you said, passive learning, passive listening. It is actually participating. We want people to share their opinions. You have retired lawyers, doctors, pharmacists, accountants, housewives, salespeople.
Experience, life
absolutely.
experience.
Yes.
And that is what should come to the table. You know,
Information we can get from a computer, anything you want.
Our,
but
our
exactly.
speakers are told, you've got 2 hours, in the first half an hour to 40 minutes, tell us what you want to tell us. The rest of it is all discussion. So the bulk of the time is spent on people interacting, and not necessarily only with the speaker. We've had a couple of sessions, because the speaker was so interesting, it became a two-way street. But in most of them, we break off into smaller groups, and people share with each other. With facilitators, as Dorothy mentioned, recently we've gotten a raft of people volunteering to join our committees and help plan programs and be facilitators at sessions. So somehow out of the woodwork in the last couple of months, people have heard of us and are starting to come out and
okay, when we
offer
come
this.
back, what do people want to hear? What are they interested in? And what have you got to offer?
We were talking about ageism and the fact that people don't feel valued. And part of CDL is making people feel valued. We value their opinions when they're taking courses. We value people who volunteer for our committees. We value people who are speakers. So that whole aspect of ageism and not being worthwhile, we've countered that because people do feel worthwhile when they're part of CDL.
Some of the things that you talk about have very much to do with this stage of life where you don't find anywhere else. Meaning, death, how to live, spirituality at this point becomes much more, much closer to your essence. Talk about Philosophy Cafe, Michael.
Well, that's going to be designed as a discussion group. Start off with a small reading from some philosopher, probably long dead, who had something important to say about some of the major issues. Is there a God? What's the meaning of life? What's the nature of man? And then let people share their thoughts. You know, they may say, I agree with this, I disagree with it. The key questions, of course, are why. And that's where you draw out people's opinions and backstories, and then you can get some good discussion going. So that'll be something which we're actually experimenting with. There's no special guests coming in, no high-profile speakers.
This is really new.
It's really a discussion group. And so we call it the Philosophy Cafe. We'll probably serve some coffee. and go from there. But there are other courses as well. We have a Mindful Life, which is really a Jewish take on how to live mindfully. Talk about meditation, talk about Musar, you know, the whole notion of living a good life, living a proper life, ethical life. We've had courses in ethics which really get down to people discussing whether they agree or not with various ethical stances on particular issues. So, you know, and the ladies can talk about other courses we've had that have been very successful in terms of the level and quality of the discussion that goes on. Mm-hmm. So,
what are people looking for in?
I can tell you what I'm looking for. I'm excited about two particular programs this fall. One that I've helped organize on meaningful retirement, which Michael's already alluded to. We have people who have done interesting things with their lives since retirement, coming in and talking about it. And it's also a little bit different in that we've got several people in at each session. So there's no one presenter. So they have 10 minutes, 15 minutes, or even sometimes less to talk about it. And then there'll be questions and participation from the participants. The other one I'm excited about is called Health Literacy, where I'm told by the people who are going to be presenting it that we will have surprising insight into how to navigate through our healthcare system. And not just the formal healthcare system, but I gather it goes beyond that to the less formal, how to maybe find help for our parents or ourselves as we age maybe. So I'm excited about that one too.
And one of the courses that I really enjoyed was a course on experiential travel. And it looked at volunteer opportunities overseas. It looked at adventure travel. It looked at travel for meaning into your life. And it provided us an opportunity or provided the participants an opportunity to look into themselves and see what they needed in their life to help make it meaningful. Because travel, staying at a resort and just lying on a beach was not the kind of travel we were talking about. It was travel that would provide meaning.
Give us an example.
We had a couple come in and talk about volunteering in Israel. And they volunteered in the army, and they volunteered through another organization. And they were able to talk about what they did, but also what it did for them and how they helped the people they were working with in Israel.
And is this with the qualification of a certain age group? You won't go on an adventure travel in the Amazon like when you're 20, or to India and backpack. Mm-hmm. Is that the cast of it? Is that the attitude for this particular time in life?
It's for this particular time in life, but I think you still could do the trip to India, the trip to Peru. I've done it. And I did a presentation on adventure travel with a woman who is approaching 70. And she volunteered in Nepal, and then after that went and climbed the mountains. She volunteered in India, and then she went on a camel ride across the desert. And so I believe age is just a number. And
What about fitness?
Fitness
And
is an
fitness.
issue, and fitness. You do what you can, and there are things I can do that people at 30 can't do, and a lot has to do with the fitness, and a lot of it has to do with your mind and what you believe you can do and want to do.
You're adding to that.
Well, the attitude. I think the attitude is very
Attitude.
different. I mean, I can't imagine my grandmother, if I said, let's go to Nepal and volunteer, she'd tell me I was Meshuggah. It's, you know, just unthinkable 30, 40 years ago for most adults to do that. Now it's not only thinkable, it's being done.
So we're walking, it's new footprints. We have nobody's footsteps to follow. It's up to us. And it's as big as and available as our imagination, but it helps that other people have gone, individuals, to guide us that way at least. So I thank you all. To get in touch with you, what do people do?
The web address
Yeah.
is cdl@prossermanjcc.com. The phone number, well, it's a Toronto number, so you probably don't need that.
Yeah, say
Okay.
it, say it.
It's 416-638-1881, and extension 4235 will get you to reception.
Okay, you can do this directly, and or if you want to make a template of this in your own community, you would help. You would help people set up. Yes?
Yeah, sure, by all
Yeah.
means. We're happy to help anybody. Look, to borrow from Abraham Lincoln, we are of boomers, by boomers, and for boomers. We're doing it all ourselves. We started from scratch. I give Arlene tremendous credit for coming up with the idea. People like Dorothy and a couple of others who were on the original committee. And we've carried it for about a year now, and hopefully we'll expand into the future. And anybody who needs our help, it's available.
Okay, thank you all.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
young or old, remember, be a mensch.